What's up, everyone? Welcome. I'm Coach Sarah Joy, and I have a amazing live for you guys today. So we are going to be talking all about what you have not been taught about gluten intolerance, and all the reasons why it seemed like over the past decade, everyone started reacting to gluten. It was just like kind of freaky how it was just this massive shift, right? But first, before we get into that, I wanted to let you guys know that this is the last time that I'm going to be doing a free educational live like this on Instagram, because I am dropping a new thyroid community called the Butterfly Gang. And I'm so freaking excited. It's going to be amazing. So I'm going to be housing all of my guest speakers, all of my live podcast, and any future incredible videos such as this in my community. And if you are on my email list, you will be notified and be provided the link when the community opens. So if you are not on my email list, you need to be. So you can join by going to my website, coachsharejoy.com, and when the email pop-up is right in front of your face, obviously that's where you enter your information so that you can be included on all of the incredible information and programs that I'm going to be dropping really soon. So without further ado, let's bring on Jessica at JMS Wellness for today's incredible live. Okay, here she comes.
Hello,
Hello, beautiful.
how are you? I
Good.
honestly, I apologize in advance. My staff at work and I have been just like talking in like an English accent for no reason the last like few months.
Oh
It's
my God.
hilarious. So every time I say hello now, I'm like, hello. It's just hilarious. So it's like
Oh my
habit.
gosh. You
It's
know
funny.
what? That's super cute. It actually reminds me of the little worm that crawls out of the wall um in
Oh,
that in the
wait.
labyrinth.
Oh, I was thinking like the A Corpse Bride when this like worm pops out of the corpse's bride's head and he's like, "Hello," and he just like gives her life advice. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, same thing. Dude, that's a David Bowie, that's an old school David Bowie movie that I haven't seen in so long. But he goes, "Hello. Hello, mate." It's so cute. So,
I think
hi,
it's
it's so
just
good to see
hilarious.
you.
You too. I'm so excited. So excited because we get to talk about history, and I love history.
I do too. And just like I was saying on my live, I'm like, I remember the shift when we went from like no gluten intolerance to like, boom, it just swept the nation. Like all of a sudden, it was just like everyone's gluten intolerant. And I don't know if you remember this, but everyone was made fun of at first. And it was just like, okay, we'll get into all of that. Let's start with your intro. I want everyone to know who you are and why I love you, and you're one of my bestest, most favorite people on the planet.
Okay, well, I guess my name is Jessica. I am obsessed with literally minerals and anything mineral related, which this whole conversation kind of dives a little bit into the surface of that, but it is all kind of related. But yeah, I just like nerding out. My mom had stage 4 cancer that she survived, and so I started studying the health food industry when I was like 15. So a lot of this is like the history of the food industry and like what has happened over the years and so on and so forth. So I've been doing this for quite a while, so to speak. But yeah, so I'm super pumped because I love talking about history. I feel like it's one thing that a lot of us don't read enough about and therefore end up making the same mistakes over and over again.
Yep.
So here we are,
Yep.
breaking the patterns. So
Yep.
I guess I'm really excited because I feel like I'm not specifically talking about gluten necessarily today, but also just like wheat as a whole. And I don't believe that gluten sensitivity is real, and I'm going to tell you why.
Yes.
And super
Amen.
exciting, which is kind of funny because I remember when we were having this conversation and you're just like, wait, you don't think gluten's a problem? And I started talking about it and you're like, what? Like, who
Hmm.
says this? So
Yep.
I'm excited to just kind of share about like things that I have learned so that I can help you guys, you know, blame
Understand.
the real problem. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So, I'm so glad you're doing a history. And because I'm with you on like, we have to understand where things come from and the history of how we got to where we are.
Hmm.
And that's one of the things that I've done too with like, well, where did thyroid issues come from? Where did these infections come from and all these things? So I am like super pumped. So are we going to start with processing, procedure, bromine? Where do you want to start?
Um, I guess you should just start with like wheat as a whole, like in general, and how I guess like the traditional methods of creating and harvesting and so on and so forth, and also where bromide fits into this. Um, so, without further ado, here we go. So okay, so traditionally, all throughout history, we have had a very long process when it comes to harvesting and growing and all that stuff when it comes to wheat. So humans haven't always eaten it, but whenever we did, it was and even any traditional place that you go to, any tribe that you talk to who still eat wheat, it's still like it is not uncommon. We have been eating it for quite a few, probably like a few thousand years. So it's not like we haven't been eating it. But the traditional ways of cooking grains in any culture is a very long process. Like, because you have so many steps involved in the like harvesting, growing, all of that stuff. I don't know. I don't remember how hard it is to grow wheat. I don't think it's too hard, but I think there's also a lot of issues with, it's kind of, I feel like it's kind of like it's not the easiest to grow, but it's also kind of like a picky crop, so to speak. Like you can't have it too wet or too dry because it can ruin the whole thing. I don't even know. That's like beside the point. But I just know that the whole process is a very lengthy one, and there's many steps involved with eating any kind of grain, not just wheat, but we're specifically talking about gluten. So a lot of people actually don't even know what gluten is, which is hilarious. Do you know what it is? Please tell me you know what it is.
Well, I like that it has the word glue in it because that gives you a like visual of what like it's the substance that holds it together like in the cooking process. But I believe it's proteins if I'm correct. Am I not?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And you would not be you'd be amazed how many people don't know that. Gluten is a protein in wheat that makes it elasticity and has that
Yeah.
gluey like texture.
Like
Yes. So thank goodness you know that. I'd be like, I'm gonna steal your coach card until you learn that. But you're good. You're safe,
I
Sarah. You
pass.
got this.
Jessica does.
Okay, so basically, so the whole process is very long, very lengthy. It always has been, even in like back like hundreds of years ago. A lot of the rich people would really they would really be the only ones that would use white flour because it was such a process to make and it was very expensive because of all the aging that had to go into it and so on and so forth. Flour typically has this like off-white color. It's not truly white like we know it today. So that was part of an aging process that would take that down. So they started adding all kinds of stuff to it to make it white. They used to add iodine to it, which was a dough conditioner that would help keep like it would help hold the shape and so on and so forth of the flour once it's already made, so that like it's just easier to like it wouldn't go flat basically. It would help with the gluten proteins and so on and so forth. But they started to get worried about having too much iodine, so they started using bromide instead. Bromide, if you're familiar with the halogen minerals, any halogen mineral. Iodine is one of them. We need iodine for our thyroid. So halogen minerals, which is what bromine is, will also affect the other halogen minerals in your body. So, for those who don't know what a halogen is, there's like chlorine, bromine, iodine. I think I said fluoride, bromide, iodine. There's like four or five, but they all affect the iodine in your body. So they started adding bromine as a food additive to help keep this dough conditioner instead of using iodine, essentially. They also started adding bleach to help make it more white because people liked the white texture. And it also made it a lot cheaper, and it also cut down a lot on the whole process of creating flour, like white flour, which
That
was really like not, it wasn't the most available for everybody. Like it basically took flour from a high class item to item that anybody can use no matter if they're rich or poor. It cheapened it and shortened the process of the aging that they used to make.
if you
Sorry,
listen
go ahead.
to the history of every product that has become toxic to us, there's always that exact same thread of like,
Hmm.
oh, they started switching to the cheaper ingredients, and then everyone, started reacting. It's like, the high, like cane sugar or whatever they used to use, like before high fructose corn syrup was like a thing,
Hmm.
and then like
Hmm.
look at how many people react to like generic medications instead of like regular name brands. It's just always an issue. So it's like,
Hmm.
so in my head when you said that they changed those two ingredients, I'm like, oh well, there you go. Like,
Well, especially if you realize how halogen minerals will always they'll compete with each other, right? So when you have too much fluoride, it affects the iodine that you have on your receptor sites in your body, which is your thyroid. So your body, if you're in an iodine deficient state, will start using bromide in replacement of iodine, which will not have the same effect as iodine will for your thyroid function. So you might be able to function, but you're not going to function optimally because your body's not using iodine, it's using bromide or fluoride or something else. So the more of that you eat, the less iodine you're gonna push that stuff out of your body. So in order to replace that and fix that, you have to have more iodine to push out the bromide and the fluoride and the other things. Of course, within reason, you don't want to just kind of like do this on your own because it can cause detox effects as well, and you always start slow, but still. But that's why they started adding bromide was they started to get really afraid that they were getting too much iodine, so they switched to bromide, and it helps keep the flour conditioned. And also the bleach that they added, which is not technically the same as the bleach you'd use for your laundry, but the chemical structure is pretty much the same. So it's kind of the same, and it keeps the flour white without it actually being white. So you're adding this bleach and this bromide to your flour. Um, but yeah,
so hang on.
so
Before you move forward, I want to just clarify
mhm.
something you just said. So she just said you don't want to start taking iodine because it can, what did you just say? You said it can.
Well, you can have detox reactions if you're not used to it. So, and you can also cause some damage to yourself. You don't want to like go too fast with iodine because a lot of times it can overstimulate your thyroid as well. So, it's better to work with someone that kind of has a general idea. And if you do start doing it on your own, don't do what I did and do like, here's 50 milligrams, boom, like right
Yeah.
off the bat. I
Yeah.
just like to do that stuff, and I always pay the price. So don't do that.
So
Always start slow and work your way up.
yeah, so I really wanted you to like point that out because I just had a lady message me yesterday and say, I just started taking iodine. And I was like, shit.
Iodine is
So
great in small
it,
amounts.
thank you. It's great in small amounts. And so that's what I wanted to say. But for anyone that's hearing this and they're like, oh, we need iodine, I suggest like a safe way to do it so you don't put yourself into the detox and what Jess just said is start with food iodine. like sea-based
Yes.
iodines, like the sea
Hmm.
moss, the kelp, the dulse flakes. That's safer.
Yes. It's not
Yeah.
only safer, it's more food-based. And food-based has molecular iodine, which is different than something you, of course, you get in a supplement like anything. Anything from a food is going to be superior to anything you get in a supplement because you're getting it in its true form that your body can recognize and use appropriately. So dulse flakes and other things, as long as they're grown in a good, safe area away from radiation, it should be fine to use like kelp and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
I
so I
mean,
just wanted
kelp
to,
is also, go ahead.
oh, sorry. Go ahead. No, finish your thought.
I was just going to say kelp is kind of like a sponge, so you have to be very careful about where it's grown. So that's something that you should always look at because you can get kelp, but if it's grown in like a nuclear wasteland, then you're not doing yourself any favors. So just make sure you're taking a good source from a good area. That's why the Atlantic is good because the Atlantic Ocean is a lot cleaner than most parts of the sea. But always like when you're looking for any kind of kelp, sea moss, any of that stuff, it should be grown in a very, very clean space.
Yeah. I always say like off the coast of Maine or Alaska or something.
Hmm.
So, okay, so that was like a total side note, but I'm glad we touched on that. Okay, so they changed the ingredients. So instead of using iodine in processing and using a off-white, more
Hmm.
um, slowly processed bleach, or sorry, not bleach, flour, they switched it out to a cheaper,
It
more,
wasn't cheaper. It was just more, it wasn't iodine based, it was bromide based. And then they started adding bleach to help whiten the flour and it also cut down on the aging time because when you harvest wheat, you're you're just, you know that like white stuff in the middle? It's called endosperm. It's like this white powdery substance. That's basically what flour is. So, but it still has this like yellow kind of effect to it. So the longer you age the flour, the more white it becomes. So, and it also helps develop the gluten, like the glutinous um, texture of the flour. So, in order to cut down on that time that it takes from harvest to like processing all that stuff, it cut it down significantly. So now you're not aging the flowers as much as you're supposed to because you're just adding bleach to it, which whitens it faster. Does that make sense?
yeah, of course.
So
So,
they're cutting the time that normally most cultures would use to age it to make it easier to digest.
yeah, and that totally explains why everyone just started reacting to it. Just like right there.
Well, it's part of the reason. There's also more. So, um, I mean, bromide isn't as popular, and but you can still, I mean, in a lot of commercial products, especially, they're going to use brominated white flour that has been bleached. So you're adding bromide, which is going to displace the iodine in your system that your thyroid needs to function. It's also been shown to cause cancer in some studies. And although bromide itself is not a banned food additive, the FDA still does discourage its use, but it's not technically banned in the US. It is banned in other countries though for that reason. So, yeah, so you can find unbrominated flour. I've actually found some at Sprouts where it specifically says unbrominated. And you can also buy flour from Italy and like European flour because it is banned over there, so they don't add it. And also just make sure you're definitely buying unbleached flour because the bleach is not helping your thyroid at all either. Like eating bleach in general, whether it's safe or not, it's just not something you want in your body.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
also like sitting here thinking like, what is this doing to our gut microbes? Like,
yes.
uh,
Oh my gosh, yeah, you're like sterilizing the inside of your body.
yeah, killing them all.
So the bromate and the bleach were added to flour to cut the process of aging. Um, but that's not all.
No.
Then we have to go into the whole enriching process. So if you're familiar with how our food is made, any kind of processing as a whole, whether it's, I mean, with dairy, for example, we'll use pasteurization as an example of this. I'm sure you talk to your clients about pasteurized food and how I always call it our dead food because you're basically
Yeah.
taking a whole food, a whole perfectly whole food from nature
Yeah.
and either adulterating it or, blasting it with radiation or, pasteurizing it, which kills pretty much all the nutrients. And then you're enriching it, which is basically re-adding the minerals that were lost because of processing. So
But
but
bonus, they're synthetic minerals,
yes,
which,
thank you very much. I
yeah,
was getting there. Yes,
yeah.
they're not only are they synthetic nutrients as a whole, they're not adding all of them back in. They're only adding like four or five. They're synthetic, very cheaply made, but then on top of that, they're also not absorbable because they're not its true form. So, for example, when you have an orange, you're getting vitamin C and a vitamin C complex, but when you're adding ascorbic acid, that's not the same thing. Like they call it vitamin C, but it's not vitamin C, it's ascorbic acid. Very different, does different things in the body, not the same effect, not no bioflavonoids. It's all fake or not absorbed, or if it is absorbed, it causes like insane inflammation in the body, which is another issue when it comes to thyroid patients as a whole. Um,
And
so
as I'm like envisioning all of this, this poor, already adulterated food, even being Franken food more to the max, I've read a lot of things of how, because we import a lot of our food, of how during the importation process alone, they also radiate the food that's
yes.
coming through border checks just
Mm-hmm.
to keep its, contaminate or whatnot. And then I'm also sitting here thinking, oh, and then on top of all of that, they might get it, bring it home from the grocery store and it's already had all that done to it. And then they might put it in the microwave, to eat it after
Yes.
that. And you're just like, oh no, just,
Yes.
uh,
You're exactly right. They pretty much put it under a whole in this whole thing of radiation. So it kind of like zaps them, radiates them, which can cause all kinds of DNA damage to the food. And then you eat that, and then you get those. And it's not even like, okay, sure. You're like, sure. Like, how big of a deal is it? You get like a tiny little bit of, but it's those micro doses that are actually worse. Like, if you think about antibiotics as a whole, antibiotics they serve a purpose. Like there's a time and a place that we need to have antibiotics. I mean, they changed the course of medicine, to be honest. Like without the discovery of antibiotics, allopathic medicine wouldn't really exist. And that's really what kind of separated allopathic from traditional medicine was that discovery. And so yes, antibiotics can be very helpful, but I would rather have one course of antibiotics that were pretty strong when I needed it versus small micro doses over time. And that's why, yes, it's not a lot of radiation at once, but it's small, tiny increments that build up in your system over time that is actually more dangerous than if you were to just get an x-ray or do something else, The x-rays are not the problem. You're not getting it all the time, but you're getting those small microdoses of radiation from your food, from microwaves, from whatever it is, from your phone, from the earbuds that you use that are microwaving your brain. Like all of these things add up over time. It's not just, it's not, it's something that you want to pay attention to. Like it's not something that you want to take lightly. Yes, it's just small, tiny amounts, but it will cause damage to your system eventually, especially your DNA, which is important.
yeah, it's sort of important. Just kidding.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Um, so when it comes to nutrients, when it for wheat, The nutrients, most of the nutrients are in the bran and the germ, which are stripped away during the processing to make flour. And then we end up eating, even if we do end up eating the germ and the endosperm, or sorry, the germ and the bran, which is where all the nutrients are in the wheat, because it is a plant, it still has those oxalates, so it's still not really the most absorbable nutrients at all. Like, you cannot really prepare any grain in an untraditional method that takes a long processing time without it having some kind of damage to your body, because or it's going to have they're called anti-nutrients that help strip the minerals and vitamins from your body, because that's what they're meant to do. They're like little magnets. So you have to, I'm stressing this so much, is that if you do eat grains, which is totally fine if you do, it has to be prepared correctly. So we haven't been doing that for a long time. We've already talked about how we pretty much cut the aging process of making the flour drastically, added a bunch of bromide, which affects your iodine, and also bleach, which destroys everything. So, and now we have this raw product that we just make flour out of, which doesn't make any sense. So, again, in other European countries, traditionally, they have always fermented any kind of dough to help break down those oxalates and basically pre-digest it. It also prevents the anti-nutrients from being able to have that pulling effect in your body. It makes it more absorbable. So if you want to compare our bodies to cows, for example, cows, when they eat, they're eating grains, they're regurgitating those grains, they're eating them again, and then they have four stomachs to break down all of the fibers from the grains, because they're obviously eating them raw. We can't do that because we don't have four stomachs, and we're not going to regurgitate our food and then eat it again, because that's disgusting.
Yeah.
But, so um, we just don't have that capability. So we have to pre-digest it by fermenting it. Fermentating. I love that word. By fermenting it. So what that does is it helps to break down all the oxalates, all the anti-nutrients, all the fibers, all the stuff that is really hard for us to digest, and also activates the nutrients in it. It makes it more bioavailable, so that when we do eat it, we're actually going to absorb the nutrition from it. So
I have a visual for that.
mhm,
So,
yes,
like we've been saying this whole time, as you're talking about the germ and the bran and digestion and everything, I have this analogy of our gut bacteria are minions. Imagine them as minions.
yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah, I get it all the
And
time.
you're right. And so
Yes.
so it's like, imagine your minions when you're eating one of these chunks of bread that we call bread that are not really bread anymore. It's just, stuff that hurts you at this point. And you eat it and it goes in, and the minions are just like, "Ugh," and they're just like, ah, and they don't know what to do. And they start fighting and they're like, what do we do with this bread? And it's just kind of this problem. And that's why you're getting like the inflammation, the bloating, the gas, the stomach aches, and the brain fog, and like all these things, right? Versus like if you were to get a sprouted piece of bread that was properly grown, processed, and that goes in, and your minions look at it and they're like, yay, and like they're gonna break it down and chunk it into pieces and then like push it through your intestines, and everyone has a happy party. Is that a pretty good visual?
Yes. Yes, I always think of them as minions too. I actually think of them of just like your garden as a whole too. Like the microbes in your garden or the microbes in your gut. And they all play a huge role in everything. It's literally, that's why they literally call it your garden of life. It's literally your gut bacteria, which is just all these little bacteria that create who you are, your personality, your likes, your interests. Everything about who you are is because of your gut health. That's why if you're a depressed, salty little bitch, you should work on your gut health because it will literally help you change your life. If you're a happy, happy person, it's probably because you have great gut health and amazing digestion. And we all deserve that. But it always goes back to what we're eating and how our gut integrity is. And it's not gluten that is the problem with this. We so if like going back to the beginning, we're looking at all of these, like every single step of the wheat process. So we have this wheat plant that we genetically modified, which is very different than crossbreeding, and so many people get that mixed up. Crossbreeding is very different than a genetic modification. They can crossbreed different plants to make new types of wheat, and that's like they've done that for a long time to help with biodiversity, and that's fine. That's different than taking the DNA of a fish and injecting it into a wheat plant.
Which
That's
is
like
what they do.
taking a cat and a dog and making a whole new species of something that is clearly not going to be fertile because it's not natural. And so you have this like random genetic modification of something that's creepy and disgusting and not normal. And
Hmm.
then it's done this so that it can withstand heavy dousing of pesticides multiple times over its growth cycle. It's
And
harvest. Mhm.
sorry, and thank you for pointing that out about the difference between crossbreeding and genetically engineered, because I've literally seen people trying to use the crossbreeding as their debate platform for like genetically modified is fine, and
Yes.
I'm like,
Yes.
what? Like, this is not
It's
even
not.
what it's saying. Like, it's a freaking Franken food, and so and from what I've learned is they actually literally build from in the lab. They put the Roundup straight into the seed that they actually build before they package the seed and give it to the farmer, and then continue to douse it with more pesticides and herbicides.
Yes. Yes. Essentially, it's like the people that use crossbreeding and genetic modification are so wrong, and they're trying to make it seem like they've been doing it for years. Genetic modification has only been around for like maybe 30 years
Mm-hmm.
ish, not very long, not very long. But of course, you can genetically modify with crossbreeding, but you're doing it in a natural way. You're not doing it in a lab. You're doing it IRL in real life. You're doing it in real life, like
Yeah, it's like
the
you
way we
take
always have.
yeah, it's like you're literally taking pieces of a plant and combining them versus like here's a syringe and here's,
Yes.
like I'm gonna put it in an incubator. Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
Exactly. So we take the sweet, we genetically modify it in a lab. We douse it with pesticides multiple times. We harvest it, we process it, take out all of the or we take out all the natural nutrients, re-add some artificial ones, add bleach and bromide. We skip the fermentation and then we blame gluten as to why we're sick. Can
Just
you
like this.
like, can we just like think about this whole process for a second and just like let's just use some common sense. Like what the fuck? I'm sorry. I like let's it's just like critical thinking skills here. It's not gluten that makes us sick. And I feel like gluten is blamed because it's easier to be like, "Oh yeah, it's just gluten. We'll just use it as a scapegoat and blame a protein in wheat as opposed to all this other shit that we allow in our food system."
And this
And
is
then
why people
tell us
wonder.
that we're crazy for the
I
people that
know.
question it.
And then, okay, so that's the typical narcissist approach to the corrupt
Hmm.
systems to be. It's like they always want to blame it back on you and say you have freaking faulty genes or whatnot. But I mean, it's like
Yes.
with that entire breakdown you just said, it's like, and then you wonder why people's bodies are just like freaking out to this and they get sick and they have all these symptoms. And, it's like, since you've been saying all this, I've been having flashbacks to my childhood because, my mom was like an abnormal, uber healthy person from the get go. Like, remember how I told you we ate our freaking Cheerios with orange juice and never milk? So I remember she had this monstrosity of a bread maker. It took up like our entire half the
Oh,
counter.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and she would make fresh bread. And I remember as a little girl, she would have the seeds, and they're always really hard. And I would play with them, kind of like, rice. And she would dump these seeds, these wheat seeds, into the top, and it would grind them, and it would smell
Wow.
so good.
Oh, that smells
And
so good.
then this like beautiful off-white, kind of like brown speckled flour would come out. And then I would see her like kneading it on the counter, and then she would make these gorgeous loaves. So I grew up eating so much fresh bread with like butter and honey on it, never once reacted. It was the most heavenly divine thing on the planet, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
fast forward when I hit 32, and all of a sudden it was like, holy freaking crap, it's like I ate this sandwich and now I have 10 symptoms connected to it. Like, yeah, there's such a big difference. So I love that you're saying that it's, gluten is being blamed, like, but really
Because it
that's,
could possibly be anything else. There's
yeah.
no step in that entire process that it could possibly be the reason why. There's
Mhm.
no reason that bromide couldn't possibly be the issue, or the genetic modification couldn't be the issue, or maybe just skipping the process of aging the flour isn't the issue. Like maybe skipping the fermentation. I just feel like if it was truly, truly, truly gluten that was the problem, then you would not be able to go to a European country and eat the bread there. They have just as much gluten in their bread,
Yep.
and they still make it the old traditional way, and nobody reacts to the bread over there. But over here, it's a problem. But it's not. It's gluten. It's for sure gluten. Don't you ever ask any questions. It's like, you guys, I don't know. I'm not. It's really hard to not be a conspiracy theorist in this industry. I swear to God.
Yes.
But I
Yep.
just, like, if you are not allowed to ask questions about what's going on, and just see, how our system is set up and how these people make so much money off of us. And of course, the first thing that they try to do is, oh, it's your thyroid, you're faulty. Let's just take your thyroid out and then make you a patient for the rest of your life. They make so much money on thyroid patients because the second you take your thyroid out, you're literally susceptible to all kinds of issues. Yes, all kinds, like metabolism, weight
Yep.
gain, antidepressants. Like, it's just a cash cow. Why would they not want to take your thyroid out?
Yeah. Why
And
do
of
they
course, they're going
pressure
to try
them
to make you
so
sick
hard?
to do it. It's disgusting. But this entire process needs to be talked about more often because it's just not. And I'm really, really tired of seeing all these stupid health coaches. Excuse my language. I like health coaches. I think they're doing a great job of what they're doing, but I'm really tired of people telling us that we just have to cut these foods out of our diet. Oh, we just cut it out. Just cut it out. Oh, you're allergic to that? Just cut it out. What do we eat? Like, for real, you cannot just keep cutting food out of your system all the time. You have to figure out why you're reacting to these things. Why are we sick? Why I can't just keep cutting gluten out and then cut this out and cut that out. And I talk to so many people, as you do too, is at what point do you just give up because you can't eat anything because it's all toxic for you, all of it. And of course, you don't want to fear food, but if you react to everything that you're eating, it's not fair. You can't just keep cutting out. We have to have a conversation about what is going on in our food system so that we can actually start feeling better and start putting the pressure on the right places instead of just, oh, we'll just cut gluten out. It's not the gluten. Let's talk about the things that actually are happening in our food system.
And this is why
Or
we,
we're just going to keep, this whole thing is just going to keep happening.
yeah. And this is why you and me, we need to have whoever wants to volunteer their time to help us make some documentaries, please DM us.
um,
So, yeah, no.
this is so
So,
fired up. I just despise the people that keep telling me to cut things out. It was one of the reasons why I just stopped trusting the entire industry for a while because it was like, we can't. This is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. We have to talk about things that our preparation of our food that we don't do anymore. Like
Mhm.
even if you genetically modify it and all that other stuff, maybe if we just prepare it correctly, maybe that will help significantly in the way that we digest it. Like maybe just fermenting things again will be helpful. Maybe we can still survive with genetically modifying and whatever it is, but we need to figure out a way to like not be destroyed by all these terrible things in our food supply.
So those women that do significantly react to eating, regular bread or regular noodles or pizza, any sort of a dough-based product that has all this stuff in it. Um, what, if they don't cut it out, then they feel like crap, so what do we do for the meantime? For the meantime, yes, I agree with you. It's like we need to fix this shit like now because this isn't cool and they're just like destroying everyone. But in the meantime, it's like we don't really have a choice but to, you know, to replace, especially if you're reacting, right? Like think about it. Like I think about the women with severe celiac. They get sick as fuck if they even look
Yeah.
at them,
Well, yeah, and celiac is very different too. Like I mean, celiac, you literally cannot eat gluten. It will destroy you.
Yeah.
It's not obviously worth it, because it is the gluten that is causing the issue. But you kind of have to wonder how celiac just kind of blew up the
Yeah.
last couple of years too. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, nobody has celiac disease like 20 years ago. Now, like the entire world and their dog has it. So
Mhm.
again, we have to ask the right questions and start asking, what was your diet like and lifestyle like before that? Is it stress related? What other factors are involved here? And I'm not obviously a doctor, so I'm not going to sit here and say like, yeah, just eat gluten, it's fine. Like, listen to your body. But I'm talking more so about the people that are told that they won't get well if they don't cut out gluten, and it's not the gluten. And I don't care how many studies are done, like on gluten specifically. I think that they're missing a huge part of the entire conversation. Um,
So
but
are
the
there
people that just avoid it, yeah, they might feel better, but are they feeling better because they're avoiding gluten? Or are they feeling better because they're avoiding the entire process of us not making and preparing everything correctly?
probably
Because if
both?
they can still go to Italy and eat the flour and eat the bread and eat the whatever, it's not gluten.
Yeah.
It's something else.
Yeah,
So those
seriously. I mean,
people,
all you hear about Italy is they live on freaking pizza and noodles. It's like and bread,
yeah.
cookies.
Mhm.
It's just like their whole life revolves around wheat. And they're fine. So, okay, so let's talk about if it's not the gluten and if they want to keep gluten in their life or bring it back in, what's the best way to go about preparing it or like maybe some products? Like, do you have any maybe products or brands in mind that could be helpful or?
So I don't really necessarily tell people to give up gluten unless they absolutely feel so much better when they don't eat it. Um, but I don't think it's necessary because a lot of the stuff that's gluten free is just not healthy, anyways. Like the gluten free products are pretty much like 4 times worse than the regular bread. Um, I think just giving up commercial flours and commercial like breads and so on and so forth, things that like don't eat Wonder Bread obviously, but like go to a local bakery and get a sourdough bread if you want to eat it. If you can or you have the time to make your own bread, you can do that. I would highly recommend fermenting it into a sourdough first to make it easier to absorb. Um, there's also like you can get sourdough breadcrumbs, you can get sourdough pretty much everything these days, which is really great. Um,
Mhm,
yeah, you can get sourdough breadcrumbs, you can get sourdough rolls, you can or like taco shells or whatever.
mhm.
Um, those are really awesome.
Yeah,
And
I actually
obviously,
found
like,
sorry, I was gonna say I found a bakery after I moved here in Salt Lake City that makes amazing sourdough starters. And they started a
yes,
bakery because they both got so sick with celiac because of all
yes,
of this. And they sell their starters like a starter kit for like $40. And once you buy one starter kit, you can keep using
it
that
lasts
over and over
forever.
and over. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
you just add grinding flour to it, and you have
Mhm.
an endless supply of bread, and then you can give it away, you can freeze them, you can do whatever, and it tastes so much better. Obviously, using like not using bleached flour is ideal. Using organic flour, unenriched flour is helpful because that can they I know they add iron to a lot of flour. So the iron that they're adding is like an iron oxide, and iron oxide is very inflammatory. It just sits in your gut and rusts, which isn't fun. So can also feed your parasites and anything else you have going on in your gut. So you don't want that. So just kind of being a conscious consumer and like getting organic as often as possible, getting it from a local bakery, making sure it's sourdough, um, and obviously not overdoing it. I think bread is delicious, but
Mhm.
um, we don't need to eat it every day. I feel like a lot of people, it's all about balance. Like, I'm not saying give up gluten and give up dairy and give up all these things, but it's just a matter of eating it, preparing it correctly that will help. But I don't believe that you have to give up gluten, otherwise you're not going to heal. And I get so frustrated with coaches that teach that because I feel like if you're anything like me and you have any kind of perfectionism in you at all, where you're like, man, I really want to give up gluten, but I just can't do it. I love bread so much for the same reason that you do, because my grandma used to make it fresh every single day. So the idea of giving it up is very hard. And I feel like if somebody told me I'm not going to heal if I don't give it up, that's not fair at all. It's not fair, and it's not even true. I don't believe for a second that you will not heal. I think it's just a matter of rebuilding your gut integrity, and you can still do that while eating bread. You don't have to give it up. You just have to eat the right types of bread and making sure you're getting the right flours and avoiding the stuff that is genetically modified and the stuff that has like all these additives and everything else that we don't need in our bodies.
Mhm.
Because when you get rid of all of that shit, then you can add like your humic acid, your fulvic acid, your aloe vera, all these things that help rebuild the stomach and help soothe the stomach so that you can heal from your issues. And you can still do it while eating gluten. I do not give a shit what anyone says. Come after me if you want. I literally do not care. We can heal and still eat flour
Yeah.
from a good source, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you really look at the underlying causes of why everyone's sick, it's like gluten is a very small factor in that. It goes in,
Mhm.
it's much deeper than just gluten anyways. So I definitely agree with that. And I love that you talked about healing your stomach because my story, like a lot of the reason why I was reacting to so many things was because my stomach was out of balance and my minerals, and it was just like my actual stomach wasn't working properly. And
Mhm.
once I just started fixing that, like realized that through the hair tissue mineral analysis with you, and then started repairing it, was like, oh, wow, I can eat again. So
Mhm.
I think that also is a lot of the misunderstanding with people's intolerances that I
Mhm.
point out all the time. It's like, are you really intolerant? Are you just lacking certain things and you just need to, like you said, rebuild your body?
Mhm.
So that is a conversation that I also find highly important within this as well.
Yes. I think it's also like there might be a moment, like a couple months or whatever, 2 or 3 months where you might want to avoid it just to kind of give your gut a break, and then kind of rebuild a little bit, and then you can reintroduce it, just like any
Mhm.
kind of diet where you're doing an elimination diet. You're supposed to re-add them just to see how you're reacting to it. And of course, everyone is so different. That's why, I mean, this is not a one size fits all approach. If this doesn't apply to you because you're celiac or you genuinely have a really bad time with gluten, that's realistic and valid. And you should definitely avoid it if you don't feel good on it. But the vast majority of people that are doing it are not doing it because of health reasons, really, or they think they are, but it's not actually helping them. It's
Yeah,
not truly the problem.
yeah, and that's why I will forever harp on my food and symptom tracking system because it's like people, a lot of times people don't know, really, they don't know what they're reacting to. They just are like, I know something's happening, and it's like, well, let's, like you said, let's try to figure out what it's from, so it's like just just a 1 week journal, 1 week journal of I ate this and this occurred.
Yeah.
That is the most empowering thing you will ever find. And I've had a lot of women where it's the dairy, it's not the gluten, and they thought it was the gluten. Or it's
Yeah.
like they, like you said, or it was they're living on super highly processed foods. And when they just simply
Hmm.
recognize that they need to eat more fruits or vegetables or salads instead, they start feeling better.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
like there's, yeah, like you said, it's not a one size fits all approach. And that's why, like, tracking your own body for just 7 days will change your life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true, which is actually really easy to do. You don't even have to work with a coach for that, but it's just being conscious about what you're feeling, especially after how you're eating. Um, and especially giving yourself a break in between too, like give yourself a couple weeks where you're just eating a very basic diet. Um, but honestly, like rebuilding the gut isn't too difficult to do. It does take time and consistency and like love, and that's the hardest part for a lot of people. Also, stress plays a huge role, which is really difficult, especially, especially in this society today. Everything is so expensive, and I feel like a lot of people are under a lot of stress. And so that doesn't help with gut either. So there's so many things that are involved with healing the gut, but it's not hard to do. It's just consistency.
Yeah,
But
like
paying
you said.
attention to how you feel is a huge part of that.
Oh my gosh, huge. And I cannot even tell you how many women are so out of touch with themselves. And that's a big part
Hmm.
of the symptoms and the illness is they don't even know who they are. And
Yeah,
like just 2 days ago, I did I did like like an end of our time together video testimonial with one of my clients. And I asked, just in the basic questions of like, what did you get from this program with me? And she's like, I feel like I know who I am. And I feel like I'm in touch with myself. And it's like,
that's so awesome.
that's
That's like
like
the best part.
priceless. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's priceless.
that's
So,
truly magical for sure. Especially
yeah,
for like I feel like it's so important for women to be because we're so intuitive naturally, and if we're not in touch with ourselves, then we miss a lot of those, or we second guess ourselves when we know the truth. We can feel it. We're such magical things. And when we're not feeling well, we're not able to really have that. We're
connection.
not really, yeah, and not just with our connection to ourselves, but other people too. We just kind of become zombies of who we were almost. And we lose our spark and our fire and our shine and all the things that we want to do. And that's not, women deserve so much better, and I mean that in a very feminist kind of way too. Like we truly are such important. Our role in this earth is very important, and when we're not feeling well, the entire balance of the earth goes just not okay. We need to feel good so that we can, live our role and do the things that we need to do to make the world a better place.
100%. I love that. I think we both agree that women are the foundation of everything. We are the foundation of our families, of our towns, our cities, the world, really. And yeah, we got to have this conversation more and try to get something something done about the food processing and all of these toxic ingredients and just this toxic whole situation that's just making everyone sick or not feel good or everything and depleting our nutrients and pushing our good minerals out and ugh, just everything you said is just so. Question, it just popped in my head. The new regenerative farming,
Yeah.
do you think that
Yeah.
maybe they're going to be a part of the answer?
Oh my God, yes. Regenerative agriculture is like the only way. It's honestly, in my opinion, the only way forward. And I felt like that for a long time because it's not, when they say regenerative agriculture, what they really mean is traditional agriculture of
Yes.
how we used to do it. That's how we used to farm. They used to have cover crops where, you give the soil time to just chill and,
Yep.
and grow some flowers and just like rest, just like we're supposed to. And then, you're not replanting everything in the same, you're not monocropping, you're not like when you create a regenerative farm, you're letting the ecosystem of the entire world work synergistically together. And then you reap the benefits of all the nutrients from that soil, from the food, and so on. I truly believe that regenerative agriculture is going to be the only way that we will ever survive as a species. If we don't do it, I don't think humanity is going to live very much longer. But it makes me very happy to see that so many people have been like, I mean, it's a lot of work. Regenerative farming is, I mean, the best part is though, it's expensive to get running, but once it is running, the farmers make so much money. And if you're a farmer, as far as I'm concerned, you deserve more money than the presidency because you're feeding the world. And and not only that, but you're create like the amount of food that you get, the amount of crops that you get from that is so much more than any kind of genetically modified crap. Farmers are not in this constant debt cycle because they don't have to buy pesticides and seeds every year. They can save their seeds. They can it creates like true freedom in farming. And
Yeah.
I like Gaia's farm does it, Herb Farm does it. There's a lot of farms that are starting to switch over. We actually just had this thing at work by a brand called True Grace, and they have also done a lot with regenerative agriculture, and they have a new like seal where they're putting like a stamp, almost like a USDA stamp, but it says regenerative. And
Mhm.
it just makes me so happy to see that there are people that genuinely are trying to get there because we don't have a lot of time left in terms of, not of course in like a fear mongering way, but like our we don't have a lot of like harvests left if we're not careful. Our food is so depleted in nutrients and our soil is so dead that if we don't do something about it, we will starve to death. It's not like what we're doing now is not sustainable. I don't even care if it's organic. You cannot monocrop. This is how we have farmed for so long. It's how the Native Americans farmed. It's how they knew how to do it. It's literally their method of farming that is what we kind of need to do.
Yeah.
These people are very, very wise. Like we need to listen to them.
Yeah, and I didn't take that as fear mongering at all because you're right. Like if we don't do something, we already are a nation of absolutely malnourished people, and that is one of the main factors of why everyone is also getting sick. And
Hmm.
so just like you said with taking it back, back to the old school shit, and let the soil regenerate and, let the natural minerals come back into the soil and then replant. I mean, shit, it
Hmm.
even talks about the soil cycle in the freaking Bible. Holy shit, I've never had this done for me, but I'm getting censored and Instagram just told me we have 1 minute and 45 seconds left of talking.
No, we only have an hour. It does
Oh,
that.
what? They have a new time
Yeah,
limit?
live. We can only do a live hour, but we can do part two some other time, or we can do it right now. I'm free, whatever you want.
We've done 90-minute lives in the past, though, and that
I
never
think it's.
happened. Yeah, this has never happened to me.
We can just do part two. It's cool.
Damn you, Instagram. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you for like you're always such a breath of fresh air, Jess. I just absolutely love you, and thank you for bringing your bombs. Your if you guys just joined or if you didn't hear this, you have to go to the beginning and listen to this. Jessica just broke it down on everything you have never heard before of why we're all reacting to gluten for real and how gluten is like not really the issue. Trust me, rewind it and listen. So I love you, Jess. Do you want to let everyone know where they can hook up with you?
Probably just my website because that's the best way right now. JMSwellness.com.
jmswellness.com, and I'll tag her out in the post when I post this, you guys. She's at JMS Wellness on Instagram as well. All right. I love you. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.